I would say that a lot of the sales process is absolutely not like chamber music recital stuff, right? It is jazz. You need to move, you need to be fluid, you need to be able to respond to see what the customer is doing. And you can only do that if you've had adequate time and a good onboarding process. If you get handed like 83 hours of videos and 4 terabytes of documents to complete in a week without even as much as an ordered list, it tells you a lot about the organization and the attention to detail of that new employer. I just want to summarize the whole high-touch onboarding in one word, and that is personalization. I'll give you 4 main areas you need to know to be able to personalize. Number 1,
hey guys, this is Michael, founder and CEO of Sales Enablement AI. Today I'm super excited because I have my great friend Neman Syed on the show. So just to give you a little background about who Neman is. He's a seasoned pro in learning and development. Previously, he worked with big names like BlackBerry, and now he's a Sales Enablement Manager at MATRIXX Software. And also he runs his own consulting firm focusing on top-tier training and development. So today we're going to talk about high-touch onboarding and the differences between onboarding and high-touch onboarding, and some of the challenges that comes with its complexities, and how Neman, based on his experience, tackled these challenges and build effective programs for his sales organizations. My friend, how are you doing today?
awesome. Thank you for the intro, Michael. I appreciate that. And I'm really pleased to be able to be part of your journey on this podcast as well. So thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Neman, just tell us a little bit about your journey, how you ended up in sales and then enablement.
Yeah. Okay. So I think like anybody in sales enablement, it's been anything but linear, right? I mean, nobody grows up thinking, I'm going to be in sales enablement. Yay. Just no, you're weird if you do that. So my background is actually civil and environmental engineering. And during my undergrad, I noticed that actually I really liked training people. I really liked teaching people. So I started a training company in 1997 after getting laid off from an environmental engineering firm. And I didn't actually realize that training was something that grown-ups could legitimately do, right? I didn't actually realize there was this idea of a corporate trainer until I finally saw it on Survivor. So
Really?
for the early people who watched Survivor, there was a guy named Richard Hatch. He was evil. He won. And I learned that he was a corporate trainer. I think, oh my God, this thing that I've been doing for years, I could actually make a living doing that, which is actually pretty funny for me. So after about 10 years of running my business, I ended up at BlackBerry on the education services team. And that was a time in 2006 when we were just changing the world. Like we were at the very bottom of that hockey stick, and it was just firing to the moon faster than you can hold on to it. So I had an amazing job as a technical trainer while I was there. And after about 9 years in just different kind of knowledge related roles, they were building a whole new sales organization from scratch. And they're looking for people with passion, but not necessarily sales knowledge. So, you needed to know what you were doing with the product and the company, but even if you didn't know how to sell or whatever, and even though I had some background, that wasn't the criterion. So we had quite the motley crew of people who were coming on. And there was this one role with one of the worst sounding names I'd ever heard, Sales Enablement. I mentioned the name to my wife, and she's like, what? What is that? Right. I mean, it really sounds like something that comes out of a codependency relationship or something like that. It's just terrible. But it was a chance for me to work again with one of my best friends from the training team. So I applied, I got the job, and it was an opportunity for me to take that very hard-won technical knowledge and communication skills that I've been developing for all this time to build this whole new sales team from scratch. So that was really exciting. And my very first day on the job in 2005 turned into my very first all-nighter on the job. Many more to come. Seriously, it was just nuts. And that was to design a whole new training program. We just had a couple of weeks, really, probably about a month, really, to start this whole new thing from scratch. So looking back, it was incredibly high touch. And I need to say that part of my inspiration for that was my own onboarding at BlackBerry, which I thought was exceptional. So I just need to really take that and go, like miles beyond what miles beyond what I'd seen. I really wanted to make this an amazing opportunity and an experience for our new people. So, I mean, it was incredibly high touch, and like we worked through every detail like you can't imagine, from top level goals like moving needles on annual general reports, the things that you're supposed to be able to do, right down to, and I kid you not, cutting out shoe footprints to tape to the floors of our headquarters in Waterloo. So we had wayfinding guidance for these new salespeople who were flying in from all over the world, never seen the buildings before, did not know where to go, had no idea where the bathrooms were, so they could see everything. We even designated a spot on every single table where the pens would be
Wow.
so that everything was top notch, right? And that doesn't even get into the content development, right, or the planning or anything along those lines. So 2 weeks of common curriculum on site at our headquarters, followed by anywhere from 4 to 10 more weeks of role specific curriculum, just loads of live skills practice, judged by VPs and higher, weekly evaluations from our team. It was intense for them. And it was intense for us, but we pulled it off and we made an incredible sales team from scratch. I'm so proud of the work we did. We had a team of 5 at the time, and we made it happen. We had no end of learners telling us then that it was their best organized onboarding they'd ever experienced in their careers. And I was so proud of that. And the best part of that feedback itself is that it wasn't something we asked for. It was something they expressed to us on their own because it was that good. And I hope they never forget it. So 7 years and a few jobs later, I ended up at MATRIXX. And one of my responsibilities was to transform the onboarding from, here's the Dropbox URL, see you at the customer meeting on Monday, right, into something that was actually good. And we're a complete remote company, and it had a $0 budget. So it was a whole different challenge for a team of 1, right? So
Wow.
I'm very, very pleased with the state of things now. But yeah, so that's my journey, skipping, I don't know, like a dozen jobs in between or something like that. So,
I love it.
yeah,
It's such
yeah,
an incredible journey. Like
yeah,
the reality that you work with such companies that they gave you this opportunity of a team of
yeah,
5 to build something from scratch with no prior experience in sales, but
yeah,
because you had the experience in education, they saw the
yeah,
opportunity. These guys are passionate. This guy's most probably going to pull it off because
yeah.
that was a risk from the
It
company.
was a risk. Wow. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm glad
yeah,
you guys pulled it off. And then you
yeah.
brought that with you to MATRIXX. And
Yes, exactly,
so I think
exactly.
everything is just kind of like connected and worked out the way it's supposed to because
Yeah,
of the fact that you really got hands on and
yes,
not
exactly.
building only just, hey, this is your one sheet. This is how you get onboarded. And you still see it
Right?
to this day. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm truly amazed that people go for like a really. It's very hard sometimes to get yourself back into beginner's mind,
Hmm.
right? And that's something I've had some opportunity to practice and teach yoga as well in my past, and at some point you understand what a movement is supposed to be so well that you can't articulate it anymore. It's like tying your shoes or taking a turn on a bicycle. It's somatic, it's in you, but you don't know how to say it anymore.
Hmm.
So you need to keep that beginner's mind, that social, that you need to keep that beginner's mind at every stage in that onboarding. You're hiring a person for a role, but they don't know your company. It's unlikely they know your product to the degree that you do. So you can't take things for granted. So it's not much of a stretch, I would say, but any onboarding has to be at least a little high touch, sometimes in the knowledge, but mostly in the organization of the content. Much more to say, of course, but
I
yeah,
love it. I love it. I love it. Like
yeah,
what I'm hearing is one of the reasons is why you actually implemented this high touch onboarding programs into again organizations that are selling enterprise was the fact that you
mm,
not only you had this opportunity to be hands on and build things from scratch and take that risk, but you basically had this mindset of that's okay, I've done it, I've been there, done that, but this is something new.
yeah,
That beginner mindset. I think is a
Yep.
winning, mindset that you bring with you to any organization that you go. All right.
Yeah.
So
You have to.
for exactly for those of us who are not as knowledgeable and advanced as you are, including myself, I would like to understand the real
Yeah.
differences between onboarding, as we all know it, and high
Yeah.
touch onboarding.
I'm gonna start kind of negatively, if you don't mind. And I would say that onboarding can be really generic and really dehumanizing. Being given a list of URLs that you need to find on your own, documents to read, videos to watch, and the thing is, like, you're actually a human being investing a very large part of your life, and in some cases, your identity into the role.
Mm-hmm.
So the less personalized attention you get at the start, the less you're going to feel that your company cares about you. And you might even question why you made this decision other than money, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question becomes, why should you care about the company? If you get handed like 83 hours of videos and 4 terabytes of documents to complete in a week without even as much as an ordered list, it tells you a lot about the organization and the attention to detail of that new employer. That it actually does tell you a lot. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that company is setting the initial conditions for your time and your contributions. And it's impossible to overstate the effect of those first impressions. That's key. So at the other end of the spectrum from the list of URLs or whatever, at both BlackBerry and MATRIXX, the real difference between onboarding and high touch onboarding for us is the level of attention that we pay to each and every individual and their role, their background, and the end goals that they've got. So everything is tailored to some degree. That's important. And that's even if it's just the order of the content. So at BlackBerry, a big company at the time, we would hire batches and batches of people at a time. And so some were new to the company, some were transitioning roles because of what we said earlier, with making a whole new sales organization from scratch. We did personalize the onboarding, but the sheer number of people meant there were limits, there were practical limits on how far we could go and what we could do. At MATRIXX, still very high touch, but we are incredibly selective in our hiring process. Nobody gets onto our sales team with at least like a decade of super focused experience in a very particular niche. So if we
Mm-hmm.
hire like 3 or 4 salespeople a year, like, we are so very specific in what we need. But in each case, all these people are coming on with really high expectations, right? And it's my responsibility to be sure, absolutely sure, that they're not only provided with the resources that they need, but they can use them, they can understand them, they can apply them when necessary, right? They can really truly learn from them. So from the time that offer letter is signed, we shape their experience to be as good and as caring as it can possibly be. That's the goal. So, and as you mentioned a bit earlier, so my own background in adult learning, adult training, it really helps me pace the content for the learner, right? Because I have an understanding of practical rates of retention and learning rates, comprehension, right? Just because you show somebody a video doesn't mean they understood it. And I
Mm-hmm.
desperately wish people would understand that. Giving someone content is not the same as them understanding it, learning it, being able to apply it, right? You can barely analyze it, let alone synthesize it in that first viewing. It just doesn't happen.
So you mentioned that
Yeah.
I have to share a
Yeah.
personal,
Yeah.
story about this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
got into sales. I mean, tech sales,
Right.
selling Microsoft Suite of product, Office 365,
Right.
Azure, in no, previous background in tech, and we were
Hmm.
selling it to CTOs. So just imagine this
Hmm.
20-something-year-old kid. Speaking of experience, said, "Hey, I'm
Right.
building an experience for my learners." So not
Yeah.
only they actually, observe and learn and adopt and then apply, but also, it shows your company culture. Do I really want to be here, or am I going to be just part of their
Yeah.
checklist? So that was my feeling
Yeah.
because, to your point, I remember those days we didn't even have laptops. And they assigned a
Hmm.
seat in our cubicle and computer and a PC, and you have
Yeah.
1 week to go through hours and
Yeah.
hours of different licensing, and then do
Yeah.
question and answers and do it as much as it's needed until you pass.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
experience itself, like at the beginning, it can really kill your spirit, and then you're like, how should I even do my job? Because I was
Yeah.
confused, and not only me. I remember we got this new batch and we were just part of this group, and
Right.
each day we were chatting about this during the break time. Guys, do you really understand what's going on here? Like, that was the biggest good topic of our
Yeah.
conversation,
Yeah.
and we're like,
Yeah.
no clue.
No.
So funny enough, this is still happening because we both have a lot of friends in enablement. And to me, that culture comes from executive team, from top down, that, hey, we have this vision, we have this culture of learning and coaching and enablement, not only for salespeople, for everyone, because it's an experience. We are
Hmm.
building a
Yeah.
brand. Then if our sellers are not happy, if they're not well trained, then what happens? Our behavior with our buyers is
Hmm.
just messy all over the place. The messaging is all over the place, and also it affects your
Yeah.
bottom line and your revenue. And we see this is happening like the past 2 years. Yes,
Yeah.
of course, it's the market conditions, all the changes with AI advancements, but in reality, like if you go back to the core of things, people are not ready. They're not skilled. They're not
Correct.
familiar even with your brand. Like, why am I even doing this job? So
Yeah.
that resonates a lot. Do you believe your reps burn leads practicing on client calls? When it comes to giving them one-on-one coaching sessions, you just don't have the bandwidth, so you get rid of them altogether? Or maybe you notice that your team spends a lot of time on non-revenue tasks like taking notes, updating CRM, or drafting emails. These are the exact challenges we solve for other revenue leaders like yourself. With Sell Me the Spend AI Coach, you can offer your reps role-play sessions at scale while automating one-on-one coaching sessions based on your best practices and methodology. Also, AI will take care of all their non-revenue tasks, like note-taking, CRM updates, draft the email for them, so they can focus on constant improvement while you're focusing on one thing and one thing only: revenue growth. If you're interested in learning more about the clients we are working with or use cases that might be beneficial to you, check us out at sellmethespend.ai. Wanted to ask a
Yeah.
question about the complexities of
Hmm.
getting these resources and getting basically buy-in, and not only buy-in, and ongoing investment for such programs, because I assume with larger organizations, large enterprises, this is not going to be a cheap practice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. It's not cheap. There's at least two ways to define cost. There's cost in dollars and there's cost in time. And it's also too easy to misunderstand low time as high value.
Hmm.
It's also too easy to misunderstand high investment as low value. Each of them has their place. So you need to really truly consider what makes the most sense. I mean, so I'll start with the time investment, right?
Hmm.
So it's the single biggest thing. Nothing matters more in sales, of course, than getting the next sale. So any time investment, any learning program design, anything along those lines, it's ultimately subject to the manager's needs. So we always need to keep that in mind. And the CFO basically can say no to whatever they want and they win. The time investment is the single biggest thing, right? So often, like we're just saying, this idea that people expect of just send them the link to the video and they'll be good enough. If you're at a franchise restaurant like a McDonald's, there isn't even a script. There's just instructions. But if you go to a higher end restaurant, you've got to memorize an entire menu and you've got to make sense of it. That takes time. And now we're talking enterprise software. There's You don't need to make a value proposition for a burger. Retail sales is not enterprise sales. And so you've got to invest your time in your enterprise salespeople, in your enterprise sales staff, to make sure they get it. They actually understand what the value proposition means, not just memorize and recite, but invest the time in them being able to speak from the heart. We know that if a salesperson isn't selling, that they're costing. But I will also say at this point in time, that is absolutely the wrong attitude. That is absolutely the wrong metric, right?
Hmm.
If they're going to get any key thing wrong, then that can represent a huge risk. Like how does it help anybody if you rush them into the field? So push hard, right? Push hard to get dedicated time, have their manager actually protect their time, or have their CRO welcome in an email and say, for the first 2 weeks, this new person is going to be focused on the learning. So please schedule your meetings with them after that, right? So give them some air cover, basically at an authoritative level. And then point out the risks of being sent into the field before they're ready. The wrong understanding, not only can it completely derail a sale that someone else has been working on, it can create incredible trouble for the post-sales teams, right? A large part of my career was post-sales, support, training, all those kinds of things. And support teams hate sales teams, right?
Because the handoff is always full of lies,
Right?
or maybe
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And that's the perspective that support people have. In fact, I remember on my very first day on my sales enablement job at BlackBerry, the the support people that I had depended upon myself in the training team came to me and said, like, thank God you're there. Because now the sales team will stop lying, right? Or at least they'll have the right information. So, and I know they're joking. I know the salespeople are doing their best, but it is a perspective that the post sale people have on the bill of goods that the customer was sold, and now the support team has to make it happen. So having the leadership support that I've experienced at MATRIXX to be able to protect this time, it's been great. So I really need to thank my own sales leadership team for being able to make that happen.
That's amazing that you've been giving that support from the CRO, from the leadership team.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm just really curious if someone in your position, just imagine you start with a company, budget is not there, you're one enablement,
Mm. Yep.
team.
Yep.
How do you really pull this off? Like it's almost impossible getting alignment, with the senior executive team, I guess.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. There's no question about it. A lot of spreadsheets. And I've said so many times, like, dude, if I could marry Excel, I would marry Excel, right? Um, there's so much organization and interviewing and everything you have to do. For example, when I'm creating the onboarding program for a pre-sales person, I make sure to hit as many different pre-sales people as I can, the team leaders as well as the people in the field, and say, like, really, what do they need to know? Do they need to know it to the level of depth? I'm also senior manager of our training team here. So do they need to know it to the depth of our trainers? Do they need to know it to the depth of our support teams? What are the programs that I can tailor
Mm,
for our pre-sales people? And to what degree do they need to know the sales content as well? The sales people as well. What do they need to know? How do they need to do it? Do they need to focus on this customer first and then get around to learning the selling process? Like
mhm,
what's their priority? And if they get it wrong, and I do ask this quite literally, if they get this wrong, what are the consequences? Right?
mm.
What screws up if they don't know this or they don't know it well enough? Right? What are you going to derail in the sale? So I have a very, very wide and tall spreadsheet of roles, topic, the associated courses, or just URLs or people, or all kinds of SME stuff. And when someone comes onto one of these roles, we've got all these things mapped out to be able to say this person in this role needs all these training courses, needs all these SMEs, needs all these tests, exams, or field work, or whatever, to be able to create a massive, complex spreadsheet for them, which turns into a calendar. So the single biggest behind the scenes tool I have is what I call my meeting planner, where I've got about 6 different time zones on it. I've got four primary weeks of onboarding time, all the way to about 2 months, depending upon the role, where I have multiple check-ins, I have meetings, I've got detailed explanations on not just who the salesperson is or the new pre-salesperson or whatever, but every single person they meet with. We've got blurbs from them to be able to say, this is my role. This is how I interact with the generic role of salesperson. This is how I interact with the generic role of pre-salesperson. Every one of the meetings that we schedule in this calendar includes, and I've written tons of macros and formulas to make all this stuff happen. By selecting the title for the new person, I create a whole set of calendar body content so that the new person, they receive a full calendar invitation, not just with the name, but they've got the title, they've got the name, and in the body, they have a write up from that SME on how, when, and why they interact with that role. And that role also has a capsule description back for the SME. Why is the SME meeting with this person? They need to know. I'm pulling them out of their work to do this.
Hmm.
So then all of this stuff goes into the person's Outlook calendar. So well before day one, their calendar is filled up with all of these meetings. And just as a bit of a pro tip, if you will, among things, not only do we schedule technical time for it, but we also make sure to invite the new employee's personal email address to every one of the day one and usually the day two meetings as well. Because we don't even want to assume that technology works, but they still need to be able to attend the meetings. Just give people explicit permission to record meetings. Give people explicit permission to attend from their personal laptop because they have to if their work laptop hasn't arrived or won't set up or all these kinds of things, right? It's almost like directing a movie just without any of the glamour, right? You have to work through every single possible thing that can go wrong, capture the 80% of the things that can go wrong, and plan for those, right? The 20% you roll with at the time, but you've got that comfort, you've got that peace in you knowing that you've covered off most of the things that can go wrong. And the things that remain are the things that actually require your attention.
Hmm.
So plan around that, discover the most likely things that can go wrong, get them into your planning, write out your procedures, and that's how you can also take a holiday, right?
So you can rest a little bit. Look,
Yeah, you have to.
this is really really interesting because it seems like a phenomena, thought after plan before even things get started. Because typically, like
Yeah,
we always see the positive. Okay, this is going to be the future state because everything is planned out. What if things
yeah.
go wrong? And this
When?
happens of when. This is a better even question. When
Yeah,
things go wrong, like what's the
yeah,
plan for it? And I like the
yeah.
fact that you give the reason, not only just a title of this meeting, like you're meeting because it's a training session,
Hmm.
you have to show up because we
Yeah,
say so. No, you're
yeah,
meeting with this person who is this persona because of that. That reason itself, I think, is very encouraging to the rep
yeah,
to understand as why am I actually doing this. Am I wasting my time or am I going to get some real value out of this?
yeah,
I have a
yeah.
follow-up question
Hmm.
about what you just mentioned. Like this
Yeah,
plan sounds amazing. Like it seems like everything is thought after. You already built this, you tested it, you tried it with different companies. What are the main measurable impacts of having this strong high touch onboarding in place when it comes to
yeah.
measuring success, or let's call it the efficacy of these practices?
I would say what you see right away is an improvement in all levels of interaction internally. By the time the person gets to their second meeting, they've learned from their first meeting. By the time they get to their eighth meeting, they've not only gone through seven other meetings, but they've also gone through this training courses, all these kinds of things in a very intentional sequence. If someone needs to know something before they meet with SME number three, I schedule that training before that in their calendar. So this is also blocked off in their calendar. So that ultimately leads into improvements in sale quality. It leads into improvements of questions that they ask subsequent SMEs. It improves their understanding. This all goes into an improvement of not just the sale itself, but the improvement in the post sale delivery,
Hmm.
because you've got that feeling of shared team purpose. You've got the corporate goals understood. You've got a stronger and more cohesive message in front of the customer. And you can see this in the number of times, for example, do I see them talking about their pitch? Can I interrupt them the way an actual prospect might? Can they recover from that? Are they asking good questions about what's the purpose of this in the selling process versus where do I find the selling process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I see an improvement in all aspects of the interactions, all aspects of the discussion, and then they make fewer mistakes, fewer own goals, right? The things that they should be avoiding, they can avoid.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, the mistakes they do make are mistakes that are either unforeseeable or somehow or other unavoidable, right? So I'm looking at this from the perspective of reduced error rate, increased ability to be confident in your sale, reduced number of questions they have to ask of a busy person up their management chain. Something very specific to MATRIXX, which may help shed some light on the why of this. Our competition is literally like 30 times our size,
Mm-hmm.
and they can give away what we have as best in class. They can give their competing product for free.
Mm-hmm.
So we need every single edge to succeed. It's absolutely necessary that our people, they know what they're doing. They need to have the best possible onboarding they can, to have the right foundation to be able to create the best possible sales team that we've got. And I mean, I gotta say, like, we have some of the smartest and most competent salespeople I've ever worked with. So there are some really, really tough benchmarks. Investing in this reduces error rates. Investing in this opens up new opportunities for them to come up with use cases. Investing in this gives them mental flexibility and speed that they can use to give actual customer responses, better objection handling, not rote. You're not a robot. Not all of us have been taken over by AI yet, right? We need to have some flexibility and empathy and recognition of what the customer needs. And you can only do that if you know your goods, products, services well enough to be able to respond. I mean, I'm not a musician, but I would say that a lot of the sales process is absolutely not like chamber music recital stuff, right? It is jazz. You need to move, you need to be fluid, you need to be able to respond to see what the customer is doing. And you can only do that if you've had adequate time and a good onboarding process to be able to say, I am comfortable with these basic ideas. My past has also included various martial arts. And so in one particular form of karate I was studying, the idea that the teacher expressed to us is that your black belt, which we think of in North America as, oh, this is a pinnacle achievement, whatever, right? The black belt means you can just do your basics unsupervised. You can finally be trusted to do the work yourself.
Hmm.
And that's the thinking I want to be able to bring to the onboarding. To somebody else, it's an incredible achievement. But realistically, it means you are now competent.
I love this. You know why? Because to me, this position enablement inside Matrix as competitive edge. As simple as that.
Yeah,
Competitive
yeah,
market, there are a lot of providers there out there. So what you guys do
yeah.
differently is first and foremost you take your time to get the best talent. They need to have some
Oh,
experience,
yeah,
they need to go through the vetting process. But by the time they come in, so these guys, because they have the background, they require this high touch onboarding to be able to be that trusted advisor through, again,
yeah,
competency journey. So by the time you get to
yeah.
that skill level needed to perform in this high competitive market, as someone that people trust and want to work with rather than anyone else, that makes enablement itself a competitive advantage or edge for the
It really
company.
does. It really does. Like you really hit the nail on the head for us. Our size is such that someone else is going to say, look, I have more engineers in this department than you have in your entire company, than you have employees in your company. How can you possibly take care of our needs? Right. So I need to be able to have our team tell that story at every level, to really be able to talk about the advantages of our product based philosophy instead of a services based philosophy, right?
Mm,
It is something that is a unique in our market. This is a unique differentiator where if you can understand what it means to sell somebody a product instead of a service, you can also convey ideas of self-sufficiency, of speed, of really good upgrades at work, and all these kinds of things, right? There's so much in the product design that sets it aside. But if you don't recognize that, if you haven't had the time to dive into why did our founders take this approach instead of the normal approach, then you're not going to be able to convey it and make your pitch effectively.
mm,
So that's very important. And if you don't get that at the beginning, the onboarding time, if you don't get that at the beginning, you're going to have a very difficult time interpreting the rest of the things that we show you along the way. It's that whole as the twig is bent, the tree grows.
yeah,
So we
yeah.
need to think about that very, very, very carefully. And that's why I even want things like buy-in from our CRO, from our sales chief of staff to be able to say, no, 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 this is an important thing. And even your VP cannot say no on this.
Hmm. Makes sense
Yeah,
because that's your
yeah,
main, as a company as a whole, main differentiation in
yeah,
the market by saying, look, we have skilled advisors. So many
yeah,
companies really rely
yeah.
on sales engineers just to kind of like run the show, if you will, after like
It's so
initial
true.
this,
Yeah.
and now you're building a skilled seller dash mini sales engineer, if you will, because selling complex
Hmm.
solutions to me
Yeah,
it's an absolute requirement to have that knowledge base. So
yeah,
it's completely different from selling like mid market or SME, where you can, to
yeah,
your point, you're selling a service, you build that relationship. But part of building that relationship with enterprise, very complex solution selling, is having the product knowledge. And some people might
yeah,
actually hate this because like these days we keep
yeah.
hearing like it's about relationship, it's about how uncover pain points. Yes, but you will lose that trust right away if you cannot speak your buyer's language and answer those
Right.
questions, especially when you
Yeah,
sell very complex solutions in
yeah,
enterprise space. Right.
yeah. I mean, with telco is unique in the sheer volume of transactions that occur per second. I mean, you just think of a large global telco and you think
Mm.
of every single thing, like literally billions upon billions of packets are moving every second. And they make their money off of each individual packet.
Yes.
So you can't get this wrong. Telecom is a whole parallel universe that is ultimately merging toward competition like Google and Microsoft and all these things as we do all this digital transformation and so on and so forth. But telco people come from a high reliability perspective. Those
Hmm.
of us who are old enough to know let you pick up the phone off the cradle and you get a dial tone, we also know that the telephone didn't fail. Like telco is so reliable, they can't fail. You may have power coming to your house through your local electricity provider. If the power for your electricity goes out, your phone still has to work. So that means the carriers even have their own power grid. That's the thinking that these people build. High volume, high reliability, cannot fail. Even one telephone outage in the past was a memorable event. We would actually talk, oh, the phone's out. Oh my God, it was amazing. It was incredible, right? Things keep changing now with digital and so on and so forth. But the idea I want to come back to here is that this is you do have to sell on value. Ultimately, you must sell on value. But if you don't know the product you're selling, if you aren't able to speak competently about the underlying technology and turn it into value, that's a problem.
Look,
Yeah,
really, really do appreciate you taking the time today. It's been an interesting
my pleasure.
conversation with you. If someone wants to reach out to you to get some advice or have a conversation, first and
Yeah,
foremost, can they and how?
yeah, sure. Find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way. And then
Okay.
that way, just like ping me, whatever, see what happens. If you are in the Toronto area, please come out to our monthly sales enablement meetups. That's a lot of fun. We get to know each other, get to be able to support each other. Typically, sales enablement people are in very small teams, often teams of one. So it's nice to be able to have a network of people. And for all of us who work at home, it's also nice to actually get out in the world sometimes and see people and do things.
I would
Yeah.
highly actually guys suggest if you're in Toronto, definitely attend. I attend actually one or two, but
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm going to be out. So I'm going to miss you guys, but I hope
Yeah.
again you continue the sessions and thank you very much again for taking the time. All right.
Absolutely. Hey, so if I could offer just one, I think I just want to summarize the whole high touch onboarding in one word,
Yeah.
and that is personalization, deep personalization. I'll give you four main areas you need to know to be able to personalize. Number one, know them as a human being. I mean, know how to pronounce their name. Right? This is a big deal. If you have a non-Anglo name and someone knows how to pronounce your name, you're like, oh my god, this is great. Where did that come from? I'm shocked when people know how to say my name, right? Um, so know their role. You actually should know the role better than they do at the start because they're coming in from scratch. You've got the access to the people they need to know, right? So know who they are as a human, know the role, know what they need to know and when they need to know it. That's critical. And the last bit that really wraps all this up is that know who they need to know and when they need to know those people. So know them as a human being, know their role, know what they need to know, and know who they need to know, and sequence that stuff. And that is how you get the personalization that you need to be able to make this whole thing work. So there you go. There's
Amazing.
my
There
spiel.
you go.
All right.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Naman. I really do appreciate you. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it and I learned a lot. And see you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right.